I know in typical fashion, you haven't done any research and I have, so I'll answer instead of you.
I have done research. I can answer if you want me to.
Welcome to Bitcoin Basics with your hosts, Faris and Gordon. Visit bitcoinbasics.help if you need help buying and securing your Bitcoin.
All right, I'll get going.
Do it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Bitcoin Basics podcast here with your culprits, Faris and Gordon. It is the 26th of September, 2022. The price of Bitcoin is $18,820. You'll get 5,300 Satoshis per dollar at the moment. And the block height is $755,702. Gordon, how are you doing this fine morning?
Good, thanks, man. I know you're rugged up. You look pretty cold. It's actually not too bad. I think we're getting into summer, so my body and my mind are both getting pretty excited about that. So what are we talking about today?
So today we are revisiting something we've spoken about in the past, but it is topical again. That's proof of stake versus proof of work. I've noticed a few people on Twitter and other places asking about that. So I thought it'd be good for us to touch on the subject. So I don't even know where to start on this one because it's a lot. There's a lot going on, but we don't want this to be too long an episode. So essentially, Bitcoin is proof of work. And let's just take Ethereum as an example, because that's what's in use. Ethereum, is that proof of work or is that proof of stake, Gordon? And what is proof of stake, actually, compared to proof of work, I guess?
I wanted to ask you what's proof of stake, but I know in typical fashion, you haven't done any research and I have, so I'll answer instead of you.
I have done research. I can answer if you want me to. Do you want me to give it a go first?
I reckon before we even get to all that, and we'll try and keep it high level because a lot of this stuff might not be interesting, but I think the basics, the broad sort of strokes are interesting. Yeah, perhaps, what do we need? Proof of work, proof of stake. Like, what is this all about? Let's keep this high level blockchain stuff first.
So proof of work is where Bitcoin gets criticized, and we've talked about Bitcoin mining. So I'll just do a quick overview now. So when a series of transactions is mined or confirmed on the Bitcoin blockchain, so with Bitcoin, if you're sending Bitcoin from one person to another, it doesn't automatically go through as a single transaction. It's lumped into a series of blocks. So all those transactions in that block, and hence the word blockchain, are confirmed through this computational brute force that essentially computers do. So we used to have these computers. Now we've got ASIC miners, which are involved in Bitcoin mining. And what they do is they're using the computers use electricity to confirm these transactions. And that's where proof of work comes from, is that there's been effort involved in confirming these transactions. So that's how we know there's no double spending in Bitcoin. And this is when we talk about Bitcoin, it is settled in that block, so it can't be reversed. And that effort, that proof of work, comes in the energy that these miners and computers use. So that's proof of work. And the criticism comes from is that, it's using energy. And we've talked about this before, the fact that is when people say Bitcoin uses too much energy, to be honest, they're not putting research or even understanding how it works. So that's proof of work, and that the proof of the transaction, the proof of the network comes in the fact that someone bought their miner, someone is putting electricity into it, into generating Bitcoin. Their return on the fact that they're spending electricity and spending thousands of dollars on hardware is that they get Satoshis or Bitcoins in return. I have no idea if that's a good explanation. I might just confuse people.
No, that's pretty good, Faris. I think the analogy that you actually used in the past was a castle. And, what's stronger, a castle that's built from stone, may have some wood in there, but a castle built from stone or a paper mache castle or a 3D model of a castle, which is stronger? Of course, the castle built from stone. Why? There's been time, energy, perhaps money, although back in the past, maybe slaves, but there's been actual energy that's gone into building that really strong, robust, secure castle, as opposed to someone who creates a castle out of wood or someone who creates a 3D model of a castle. So you can see real world energy. And in case of Bitcoin, that energy is electricity. Now, Faris mentioned the environmental effects of that, and we'll get into that in a moment. And a proof of work is something that we call a consensus mechanism. And that's a fancy way for how to decide, what to do in terms of group. And proof of work actually wasn't invented by Satoshi, whoever he, she were. It was actually invented or created by Adam Back. And those who may know that Adam Back is the CEO president of Blockstream. He actually came up with this idea in the 90s. I think it was 96 or 97 to combat spam. So, for example, a spammer wants to send an email to 1 million recipients. Well, with a CPU of today, you could do that fairly easily. But what if you attach a cost? So that cost of, say, a CPU solving a puzzle, so that every recipient that you're going to send to has to solve a puzzle for 5 seconds. So if I want to send an email to Faris, an anti-spam measure would be, before I can send to Faris, my CPU has to do all these computation and puzzle solving and whatnot, and it will take about 5 seconds. So for me to send an email to you, 5 seconds, no big deal. But for me as a spammer to send 1 million email addresses, that's going to take forever. So that's actually where proof of work came from. It came from this anti-spam measure to show that, no, you must put real-world energy and effort into something that you want to do. And the more energy and the more effort, the more cost that's going to be. So it sort of incentivizes people not to spam. And that's what we call a consensus mechanism. And I won't go through that too much. But for example, if you had, say, 10 people in a group and you got 10 friends, and you're deciding on where to go for holidays. A certain group of people want to go to Bali, and a certain amount of people want to go to New Zealand. And let's say 6 of your friends want to go to Bali, and you're in one of the 4 that wants to go to New Zealand. I want to go to New Zealand. I want to visit Faris. Well, the consensus of the group is that we're going to go to Bali. So as a person that wants to go to New Zealand, I'm in the minority. So the consensus of the group is to go to Bali. I could, for example, call up 3 friends. I know, Faris, I don't have maybe more than 4 friends, but let's just pretend that I have another 3 more friends. I could call up 3 more friends and add them into the group. And I know that they want to go to New Zealand as well. So now that we don't have 10 friends, we have 13 friends. And because they want to go to New Zealand, now we have 7 friends who want to go to New Zealand. So the group consensus has now changed from Bali to New Zealand because I've brought 3 more people into the group. I know that's like a superficial analogy, but it's important because a lot of people talk about voting and that kind of stuff, but it really is this way of deciding what to do, who controls the group, who controls the network, who makes the decisions. So in the case of Bitcoin, that's obviously the Bitcoin miners. The Bitcoin miners decide, what is the correct Bitcoin blockchain. Someone tomorrow might come up and say 21 million Bitcoin, that's not enough. I want to quadruple that and make it 82 million, which is basically what Litecoin did. And the miner will say, well, we don't want to do that. So you're only one miner out of 10,000. We're just going to ignore you. And you can create Bitcoin 2 or Bitcoin version 3 or whatever, but we're going to ignore you. But I could spend a lot of money, buy a lot of miners and, 5,000 or whatever, and have more than 51% of the network. Then I could actually control the Bitcoin network. Now, that would cost me millions, if not billions of dollars to do it, which is why people don't do it. And there's no incentive to do it. And actually, to make money, I should just put my miners to work on the Bitcoin network. So it all works by incentive in game theory. But that's why we have these things called consensus mechanisms. And I know I've gone on long about it, but that is why we have it to basically determine who controls the network, who makes decisions. And in Bitcoin, that's proof of work. Ethereum and there are other Bitcoin. Yeah,
So
sorry, just before I finish, there are other Bitcoin. There are other proof of work networks out there. So, for example, Monero and some other coins that you may have heard of, they use the same consensus mechanism, proof of work. So it's not just Bitcoin, but that's basically what proof of work is.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, like, and share so we can find others like yourself.
Okay, sorry, before we move on to Ethereum, I just wanted to kind of do a recap. First of all, the analogy of the castle, good one. That wasn't me. That may be your other co-host that I don't know about.
Okay. Yeah.
You're confusing me and him or her or she. All right, so consensus. So yeah, this is one thing I really like about Bitcoin. And this is something where it actually took people who got into Bitcoin early, trying to understand it from an economic level. They actually got quite nervous about this because I remember Raoul Pal, who we had on the show. This is actually one of the reasons he sold his Bitcoin. It was around $3,000. Was he thought, I believe Bitcoin could be changed, and he thought that Bitcoin was set in stone and it couldn't change. But when you dig into it a little bit more, is where you appreciate just how. I don't want to use it. I actually don't even know how to describe this. This is not democratic, but the consensus works in Bitcoin in that. So let's say a developer or someone, and this is a thing with Bitcoin, anyone can say, I want to make a change to Bitcoin. I want to increase, let's say, all right, we've had 5 million Bitcoins lost. Let's just replace the network with those 5 million. So 5 million Bitcoins lost of the original 21 million. Let's just make it 26 million Bitcoins now that we're going to mine. Well, everyone involved in Bitcoin, like you said, would have to implement that change, have to accept it. And I suppose it's the same thing, like there's a new app on your phone or a new upgrade on your phone. You have to click confirm to bring it onto your phone. It's the same thing with the Bitcoin network in that the miners go, okay, this person is suggesting this upgrade to Bitcoin. They want to introduce 5 million new Bitcoins. And yep, I agree. So I'm going to switch over. And we then have to see, as Gordon said, would it be 51% or 80% of the network switching over?
Well, you're talking about two different things. In terms of the proof of work, it's simply 51%. 51% of miners control the network. In terms of changes, I think it's 80% or 90% of developers and whatever have to.
So let's just stick with changes. So 80% of developers would have to implement this upgrade to Bitcoin as we know it. Now that's a lot. And from people going, okay, that's a bit nerve-wracking. The people can change Bitcoin. For me, this is pure economics and market forces. Is if you're involved in Bitcoin, you understand the 21 million capped supply and demand. You understand how valuable that is, and the fact that the Bitcoin halvening takes place every 200,000 blocks. You appreciate that. I don't believe that you're going to increase the supply because you'll just basically see the price go down. So I think the people involved in Bitcoin mining understand that, and they're not going to do that. And we went through the block wars in 2017 where this didn't happen. So that's when we're talking about consensus, that's what he's talking about. The fact that Bitcoin, there is no CEO, there's no board that can basically regulate Bitcoin. It's up to the miners and the users to do that. And it's never actually been done in monetary history where you do not have a sole governing body to determine the future of this currency. Whereas with Bitcoin, it is the people involved in it that determine the future. And that is just, it's a huge appreciation for when you understand Bitcoin, because if you're a citizen in America, you don't determine the interest rates, you don't determine how the Fed's printing money, they just decide to do it. And that affects you. Whereas with Bitcoin, no, you actually, if you're involved in the network, you determine the future of the network.
Yeah, there's no Fed chair. There's no one person who stands up and puts some magic numbers on the screen to determine the entire world's economy. Just one distinction, though. We are talking about consensus, and consensus is the blockchain's way of saying who is in control, and that is who has 51% of the hashing power, the computational power of the network. To make changes and all that kind of stuff, that's the developers, and that's a little bit different. But in terms of blockchains, that's consensus.
Yeah. So this is where it can be a bit. So So with the 80%, that's if you want to add improvements. Like, for example, that's when they introduced SegWit. That was the 80% because it was just adopting.
Don't quote me on it. Don't quote me on 80%. I think it's 85 or something. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. It's a higher amount. And anyone, as you said, anyone can make changes. You can go to bitcoin.org. There's a link to the what is called GitHub repository, open source. And you can say, I reckon there aren't enough Bitcoins. I want to make it 42 million. Now, no one will vote for it. No one will back that at all. Because there's incentives for people who are developing and owning Bitcoin not to inflate the supply. I mean, that's the beauty of this whole thing is there's a lot of game theory behind it. But in terms of the blockchain itself, we're talking about consensus, how the blockchain determines, for example, if there's a rogue element and they put a lot of hashing power, they get 30% or maybe even 40%, or maybe even for a split second or maybe for a couple of hours, someone puts a flood of 10,000 miners onto the Bitcoin system, you will have what is called a fork. And I won't go into it, but basically, the blockchain will be split. There'll be the people on one side that are normally mining Bitcoin, as it has been. There'll be the people on the other side who, for whatever reason, they're changing the Bitcoin rules, and there'll be two, kind of like a split of Bitcoin. But that's consensus, and there are many different forms of consensus called a consensus mechanism. What we've been talking about is proof of work. So, and there are other kinds of proof of whatever, but the main other one is called proof of stake. And this came around as an idea in about 2012, 2013, quite a while ago. And it's hard not to talk about proof of stake without talking about Ethereum. Now, there are other coins that use proof of stake like Cardano and whatever, but I think Ethereum's a good example, and it's the number 2 coin, and it's just gone through a merge from proof of work to proof of stake. So what is different between proof of work and proof of stake? In a proof of work system, you don't have miners. So in a proof of work system like Bitcoin, you have miners. They are validating the transactions, and they're incentivized to do so because they get what is called a block reward. They also get fees from processing transactions. Ethereum, because they think that Bitcoin is boiling the oceans and killing babies and all kinds of stuff, melting ice cream, they have moved to a proof of stake model that has completely eliminated mining. Okay, well, who validates the transactions? So I think the word that they use is a validator. So you don't have a miner, you have a validator. And a validator is a node or, a machine that previously, I'm struggling to explain it, but a validator is sort of similar to a miner in that it processes transactions, validates transactions, but it doesn't do it through electricity, solving computational problems. It does it because someone or a group of people, you can pool it, has staked money, well, Ethereum, not money, into this system. And for example, with Ethereum, it's 32 ETH for the privilege of being a validator. So let me say that again. No mining. Someone has staked, in Ethereum's case, it's 32 ETH for the privilege of being a validator. And so the Ethereum network essentially has these validators, we can call them nodes, validators, that verify transactions and do the job of a miner without mining. And they get to do that because they've staked Ethereum.
Okay.
So put that in your pipe and smoke it.
Yeah. I'm fiddling with tobacco right now. So first of all, just one thing I want to recap for people listening: a 51% attack on Bitcoin is basically someone who, as Gordon says, will buy miners and basically just try and control the network. Now, the cost of doing so for a 51% attack is you would have to spend $42 billion on hardware, $43 billion, and it will cost you $29.5 million per day to control the Bitcoin network. So as more and more people join the Bitcoin network, that cost rises. So The only people that have that kind of money right now would be, well, actually, there are some people, but I don't think of an individual who would want to do that. And a government could, but they'd have to justify that cost. So it's
and also, Faris, it's not just that cost, because that's just the cost of, say, mining. You also have to have the infrastructure in place. Like, you can't just plug miners in. You got to build mining plants. You got to pay for employees. And also, those miners aren't available. You can't go down to the Best Buy or Walmart and buy a miner. You got to wait for, you got to source the miners and all that kind of stuff. So it's,
Yeah. So anyways, the point we're trying to say here is, in the world of Bitcoin, because we're dealing with a lot of economists and developers, is there are no absolutes. It's not like Ben Bernanke, who in 2008, 2009 says, oh yeah, we can absolutely control inflation. Well, look what they're doing now. This is what I love about Bitcoin, is that if there's a 0.0001% chance of something happening, the Bitcoin community will prepare for it and talk about it. So anyways, now, what I like about Bitcoin is I've seen this happen. Like, anyone can join the Bitcoin network, as in become a miner. I personally can just set up a miner in my garage, let it run, and just through, it's not, I don't want to say luck, Gordon, I'm sure there is a engineering term for this, but I could actually, and I've seen this happen, someone running a single miner will receive the entire 6 Bitcoin reward for that block. Is very, very unlikely. The mathematical probability of that is very low, because you're competing against huge pools. But that has happened, where someone running a miner has validated a block and they've received 6 Bitcoins. Now, Ethereum does not work that way, does it? It's because basically, if you stake Ethereum, you are guaranteed a set return. And the more you stake, the more return you get in Ethereum. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we're conflating Ethereum and proof of stake, but for Ethereum, you have to stake 32 ETH to become a validator. It's not guaranteed, but the way that it works is that you stake your 32 ETH, so that's actually locked up, and you get to validate transactions. The chance of you, so for example, with Bitcoin, the more miners you have, the more hashing power you have, the more chance you have of getting the block reward, of being the first to solve this puzzle on the network. With Ethereum, the more nodes, or the more, these validators that you have, the more chance you have of being able to process the next block. In other words, be able to get the block reward. It's not a direct, the more you have, but it's, you do have a lot more chance.
So basically with Ethereum, if you get in early and if you stake more, you automatically have more control of the network. It's not. Is that correct?
Correct. And the issue with that is that you might say, well, that's a fair system. People, and also a lot of people who have less than 32 ETH, because 1 ETH is about $1,400. So we're talking about around about, if my math's correct, about 400,000. No. What are we talking about?
No, you're about right there. So Ether, let me check the price of Ether, actually, because I haven't checked that for a while. I think, what are we now?
Not 45,000, let's say 45,000. And a lot of people don't have that. So you can actually pull together, you've got 1 ETH, your friend's got 1 ETH. So you can actually pull together, 32 different people, 100 people, and pull together to have this just one node between several people. But that is staked. That is usually sitting on an exchange. So that's another point that we'll get back to. The money isn't in your hardware wallet. It's actually on an exchange, and there's an implication behind that. But here's the problem, Faris, and this is why, and it's going to trigger a lot of Ethereum people. And I'm not against Ethereum. I think Ethereum does some amazing, innovative things. The only problem I have with Ethereum is when they try and say that they're hard money and they're sound money. They're not. You could say that Bitcoin isn't as well, but it certainly is more than Ethereum. The problem I have with Ethereum is that it was pre-mined. So when Ethereum came out in 2012, around about 65% of the Ethereum was already pre-mined. That went to early contributors. That went to people like Vitalik. that went to the Ethereum Foundation. So, and you might not have a problem with that and say, well, yeah, you're rewarding early adopters. But now that you've gone to this proof of stake model, it changes everything, because those early adopters, the Ethereum Foundation, the developers, they have maybe even more than 60%, maybe it's 70%, 80%. I don't know the inflation policy of Ethereum. They have enormous control now of this proof of stake network, because it was pre-mined before the public could even buy Ethereum. They've got 65% of the Ethereum network. So that's one of many problems that I have with proof of stake.
Yeah, and just on that as well, Gordon. So I'm looking at it now. The circulating supply of Ethereum at the moment is 122 million Ethereums out there. And unlike Bitcoin, there is no capped supply. So what do you actually get if you're staking Ethereum? Is it like a yield? You just get Ethereums in return?
So if you're staking Ethereum, like Bitcoin, you get the chance to validate the next block and receive the block reward. And don't ask me what that is. 2 ETH, I think, maybe. I, to be honest, I'm not really sure. And you also get the fees from validating that block as well. So almost the same as Bitcoin mining. If you're a miner and you are in a mining pool, you get the block reward split amongst how many people are mining, and you also get the transaction fees. So it's very similar to Bitcoin mining in terms of rewards.
Okay, cool. Yeah, rewards per block. No, you're actually right. It's 2 Ethereum rewards per block. Well done.
Okay. So in theory, and I listened to a couple of podcasts about this yesterday. In theory, it sounds good. You don't have any mining. There's no wasted electricity. You're not killing the world and global warming, climate change. You're moving to this model of not only are you not expending the energy, but you're potentially able to create a faster blockchain. And in the case of Ethereum, and this is an episode for another day, Faris, but in the case of Ethereum, they're actually splitting up the Ethereum blockchain into 64 bits. And this is something that we won't. Huh?
Sorry, Gordon, go.
This is something we're not getting into today, but a lot of the arguments for proof of stake is that it's, number one, it's more efficient, which I could actually argue that it is. Bitcoin's very slow, and it's sort of designed that one purpose. It's more efficient. But the argument is it's infinitely more secure and more scalable. Ethereum is actually split into 64 bits. It's called sharding, by the way, a topic for another episode. And so they're splitting the Ethereum blockchain into 64 bits. So whenever you're doing a transaction or that's getting processed, it's only getting processed by 1/64th. And the Ethereum, somehow people are saying that's more secure. So anyway, it's just the insanity of what we're living in. From a technical point of view, I could probably say that it is more efficient than the Bitcoin blockchain for sure. But what they're losing by going to proof of stake is an enormous amount of security, the potential for a 51% attack, and also basically the potential for people with a large amount of money to make more money, which is true in Bitcoin. You know, if you've got a large amount of Bitcoin, you can make more Bitcoin. But no matter how much Bitcoin you have, you can't control the network. So that's the real difference between proof of work and proof of stake.
So when you say it's better for your environment, in that basically there's no miners running for Ethereum at the moment. That's the difference. It's just you boot up your laptop and it's just like a spreadsheet that's already open.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's 1% of mining. You know, you still have to have the computers to be processing transactions, but yeah, essentially there's no mining.
Okay. All right. So if we can recap, I know it's probably gone longer and a bit more confusing than our audience was expecting. So
I think we've lost everyone.
Yeah. So for the one person who's listening. All right. So Ethereum is proof of stake, which basically means a lot of Ethereums, around 60% of Ethereums were actually provided on the outset. There is no cap onto how many more Ethereums can be created. To create new Ethereums, unlike Bitcoin, they don't need to be mined. So there's really no work or effort involved in creating these Ethereums. It's just like Control P.
Yeah.
Okay. So to me, from an economics point of view, that diminishes the value of Ethereums because if supply goes up and demand stays the same, the price will come down. And well, it's a necessity of it. But we have seen some three-letter agencies based in Europe saying, oh, we want Ethereum because there was no proof of work involved, but that makes it no different to a fiat currency.
Yeah, and that's the important point. At the end of the day, we've been talking techniques from an economic point of view. And by the way, the SEC chair has actually raised concerns over these proof of stake and staking models. And, Bitcoin, you can't send a letter to the CEO, but, if a three-letter agency, whether it's America or Europe or wherever, has a problem, they can actually send a letter. They can send a letter to the Ethereum Foundation. The Ethereum developers are known. So I don't think people appreciate Ethereum could disappear overnight if governments wanted it to. Let me say that again. If you've got money staked on exchanges or whatever, you got thousands of dollars invested in Ethereum, it could literally go to zero overnight because a government decides that, well, no, proof of staking, we don't like that proof of staking, or we're going to heavily regulate it, or we're going to tax it differently. There are a million things that governments could do to regulate it and stop it. So I don't think that could be understated. And last point, Faris, I know that we've been bang on about it. It really is more centralized. And so the reason why Bitcoin is decentralized is because of the mining. The more miners in more locations around the world, the more decentralized it is because you have this proof of work, this hashing, this computational power, essentially verifying transactions around the world. And the more people do it, the better. The more decentralized Bitcoin is. Now, it's on a scale. It's not like a 1 or a 0 or yes or no. It's on a scale. But with Ethereum was already centralized by having this pre-mine in 2014. But it's even going to be even more centralized now because what people are going to do, and this comes back to the last point, is staking. So in order to have these validators, you have to stake 32 ETH, whether you do that with yourself or whether you join a staking pool. But you also want to earn rewards on that Ethereum as well. And you get locked into I think it's a 1-year contract, and you can't just easily get out of that, unstake it, so there's a liquidity problem there as well. But you're incentivized to leave it on exchanges. So you've already got a centralized system by having 65% in 2014 owning Ethereum. But now you've even gone more centralized because people aren't going to leave their Ethereum on hardware wallets. They're not going to leave it in their own wallet. They're going to leave it on Binance, on Coinbase, on Kraken, or all these big exchanges that offer these staking rewards and offer incentives. I mean, Coinbase has something called staking as a service. And so now you've gone from individuals owning Ethereum to 4 and 5 of the world's largest exchanges owning Ethereum. So now you've only got, instead of 5,000 or 10,000 validators, you've got 4 validators, Binance, Coinbase, Kraken, and whoever else. So you've even centralized it even more. So it just drives me crazy when Ethereum people say this is going to be infinitely better, more scalable, and also more decentralized. It's like, I don't know how you can claim that.
Oh, and leaving them on exchanges as well just gives that judicial oversight from the government, because the government's come out and already said, well, we believe Ethereum's is security, or they've hinted at that. So if you leave it on an exchange, it's basically saying, yep, we see who owns the Ethereums, and this is now a security. You got to pay taxes and XYZ on it.
Yeah, well, as I said a couple of weeks ago, the SEC chair actually said they were concerned about these staking models. So who knows what regulation is going to come out of that? Yeah. But just be careful if you have some Ethereum or you have some of these other coins. Laws could be passed overnight that shut them down or heavily regulate them. I mean, maybe they don't shut Ethereum down. Maybe they tax Ethereum staking in a certain way. I mean, I don't know. So it's certainly not decentralized. That's my point at the end of the day. Yeah. And the last thing I will say, Faris, and probably not the only, but One of the major disadvantages of proof of work, I think it's the best way to go. And we have had an interview with Will from SAS Mining, and this episode will come after that. So you can check out that episode. Bitcoin actually has a massive opportunity to not only use renewable energy and get to 100% green Bitcoin mining, but actually capture stuff like methane and actually be good for the environment and actually be carbon negative. So Bitcoin could potentially in 5 or 10 years' time be actually carbon negative, which is obviously a good thing. I would say the only disadvantage of proof of work, and I'm sort of kicking myself that I didn't ask Will in the interview, is when ASICs, so ASICs are these miners, so they're basically kind of like these black boxes, and they do one thing, and they do Bitcoin mining. So they've got they've got multiple CPUs, and you plug them in, and they basically
not just Bitcoin mining. You can move them onto other coins if you want to.
Can what? Sorry,
not just Bitcoin mining. You can switch them over to other coins or forks if you want to.
Well, no, the Bitcoin miners can be used for Bitcoin mining. That's all they can do. So
ASIC miners could be used for any other coin.
No, they have to be specific for the algorithm that they're mining. So other proof of works like Monero and other stuff actually use a different algorithm. So you can't even use them for that. So that is my only problem with, and it's a problem that potentially could be solved, is that when these Bitcoin miners get superseded, so the latest Bitcoin miner, the S19 Bitmain miner that costs $4,500, when that gets superseded in 2-3 years' time and everyone moves to the next generation miner, whatever it is, that essentially is e-waste. It goes into landfill, maybe not straight into landfill, but it basically can't be repurposed for another use. So that's really the only problem that I have with proof of work, especially with Bitcoin miners, is that, there is a bit of waste there, and there aren't projects looking at repurposing and how could you actually, say, for example, grab the CPUs from it and repurpose it as something else or whatever. So that's probably the only, and it is definitely a problem. I mean, you've got tens and thousands, 100,000 of miners that are basically old and superseded. What do you do with them? Well, that's a lot of waste to get rid of. But I mean, comparatively with other things like the US dollar, it's not. But yeah, that's one problem that does exist with proof of work.
Sorry, James Walter. Yeah, this is one thing I actually appreciate about Bitcoin is people criticize proof of work, and I've heard other ones. And the way I look at it is, well, that's room for improvement in Bitcoin. And it's like, do you want to buy an investment that's done everything it possibly could, or something that already has room to grow? The answer is you want to be involved in something that has room to grow, because then it will appreciate value. But yeah, after the interview with Will, I've had so many other questions I've been thinking about, so I'm keen to follow up with him as well. But all right, well, I think we'll finish that one there. Guys, I hope this helped. We have had some queries about proof of work or proof of stake. Please hit us up at bitcoinbasics.help and submit a question online, and we will help you, try and help you out.
Yeah, and I know, Faris, we've gone on quite a long about this, and at the end of the day, for me, just as a last point, it comes down to centralization versus decentralization. And through Bitcoin mining, Bitcoin is not perfectly decentralized. There are still mining pools out of, it used to be China, but it is fairly centralized. And what was said about Ethereum moving to proof of stake is all those issues. And another one that I just thought of, this is the last point, I promise. Because the Ethereum blockchain is now moving to a faster, more efficient system, there are going to be more transactions. That actually means that their blockchain, the size of their blockchain actually grows exponentially. So through all this stuff like sharding and all this kind of stuff. So that can't be understated, because there are some blockchains that are only 1 or 2 years old that use proof of stake. The size of their blockchain is now 4 times larger than the size of Bitcoin's blockchain. And a lot of people are saying, well, so what? Hard drives are cheap or whatever. But no, if you think about it, if you can't run a node, so for example, with Bitcoin, the Bitcoin blockchain is 450 gigabytes. If you can't run a node on normal hardware, your old PC in your garage, or go and buy a $30, $40 chip computer and run it on that, It means it's inaccessible to the average person, which means that only big companies are going to do it, which means it's more centralized. Currently, you have to spend $3,000, $5,000 buying a really fast computer with multiple CPUs, fast hard drives to even run an Ethereum node. So that means that these things are going to get more and more expensive. And the more inaccessible a node is, the less people can verify it, which means it's going to be more centralized. So that's just another reason why Ethereum and a lot of these proof of stake is going to be more centralized. And Ethereum's like, we're going to do 1 million transactions a second and all this kind of stuff. It's like, just use a database. Like, seriously, I'm not joking. Like, what you're doing is what a database already does. Databases have been around for 60 years and they work really well. They're really efficient. They're really secure. They're really fast. So just use a database. And that's it, I promise.
Thank you very much, Gordon. Guys, thank you for listening. Please go to bitcoinbasics.help, share, subscribe. We do need to grow our audience much better than we've been doing. So, yeah. And if you are listening to us, we actually kind of want to hear from you guys. If you've gotten involved in the Bitcoin industry, network, and you want to come on the show, please just reach out.
Yeah, absolutely. Please reach out. And if you have a question, bitcoinbasics.help/ask. Ask a question. It doesn't have to be necessarily directly related to Bitcoin, but yeah, technical, economic, whatever. We have answered 100% of questions that people have recorded. So please hit us up.
Thanks for watching or listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like, subscribe, and share so we can spread this educational content to others like yourself. Visit bitcoinbasics.help.
Disclaimer. Any content provided by CoinCompass is for educational and informational purposes only and is not investment, legal, tax, or any other professional advice. A qualified professional should be consulted before making any financial decisions. CoinCompass will at times recommend certain products, services, and technologies, but these are opinions based upon our own or podcast guests' experience and not endorsements. We take no liability for out-of-date or inaccurate information, software bugs, manufacturing errors, technology misuse, or issues involving third parties. Visit coincompass.com for more information and please contact us.